things evolve, right? And guns are gonna evolve. And if I have the ability to be able to shoot something that is as powerful as a grenade, are you gonna be like, that's your right, because if someone can have it, I should too.
It's the Second
or someone
Amendment.
can, and that's the problem. There has to be some restriction, unless you all believe that we should all be able to have nukes at our homes, grenades at our homes, grenade launchers at our homes.
We should be able to have equal whatever the government has.
Y'all not ready for that conversation. So unfortunately, we had a little bit of an issue with the Jubilee gun owners or pro-gun versus anti-gun reaction video. We were doing it live, and because we are not whitelisted with Jubilee, unfortunately, the copyright system on YouTube got a little bit aggressive and it pulled us down. So we were not able to finish the reaction video. So what we're going to do is we're going to keep it a little bit more tight and concise. We're going to find some select moments in the video, in that particular video to react to offer commentary. And of course, we are going to do everything under the fair use doctrine. So we are going to be adding commentary. We're not just watching a video just to watch it. We are adding our thoughts and input to the content, and I hope you enjoy.
Welcome back to Middle Ground. My name's John. I'm the host of the Radical Empathy podcast, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Our topic is pro-gun versus anti-gun, and our first prompt is, I fired a gun.
I always find these a little bit interesting, specifically when watching this video and then going back and having conversations with people in my real life. You realize that some people with the strongest opinions on guns have never actually held nor had any real interaction with a firearm.
So my family does hunt. That's a part of our culture. And when I was younger, my dad, I've gone with him. I've never killed an animal, but I have gone with him for like tracking purposes or, being outside, connecting with nature. And he did teach me how when I was younger. So it's not something I've done regularly, but I have done it.
Same here. I've got like family friends that are very into guns, and one summer they wanted me to have the experience of like shooting a gun. So I tried it. I didn't love it, but try everything once, I guess.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, even I have an experience trying to get somebody out shooting, and maybe you bring a caliber that's just a little bit too powerful, or you try to shoot inside with not the best hearing protection, and it's just too loud and snappy and aggressive for certain people's temperament. Not saying that everybody has to enjoy shooting guns, but there's ways to ease people into it that's not just the most aggressive, most exciting, or the most scary, per se.
Why didn't you love it?
I just didn't like the feeling. It was really heavy. I was very young, and I don't know. It just wasn't for me, I guess.
I spent a lot of time in the Middle East growing up, so when we were in the Middle East, we would hunt, use guns in general, and when I would come to America, my family's had guns, I even have guns, and so I've shot multiple times.
Well, I've shot a gun.
So he is a gun owner currently, but he's on the side of the anti-gun debate. Now, is this a rules for me and not for thee type thing, or is he wanting to be regulated himself? Do you want to be regulated?
I loved it, and my whole family loves guns, so I think that's kind of how the culture was instilled on me.
Yeah. Well, my whole life is guns.
That's Black Rambo. I've met him once or twice. We've been at a few events together, a couple mutual friends. He seems like a good guy overall. In general, he's kind of high energy. He plays a character, like Black Rambo is a character, and he's a different character today. Really, I think he's a bit more sincere in this interview than in normal. Like if you watch his videos, kind of short reels, 60-second videos, really high energy. But in this one, he's a little bit more subdued and really sharing his thoughts. Take a look.
I own over 300-400 guns. You know what I mean? So I shoot them all the time, every day.
That's a lot of guns.
And I'm also a United States Marine Corps war veteran. I've been to war. So I shot a lot of guns in my life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I grew up around guns. My father was military and police. My older brother was military and police. My little brother is military. And I was taught to fire weapons at a very early age because my father believed that if you remove the curiosity from a child about the gun and they're uncomfortable with it, they won't be interested. So he was right. It created gun safety in our home. I did not like firing a gun when I was young, and I fire guns now regularly as an adult. It is about the gun and how it feels and how it shoots and how you operate it. So
I do that with my kids.
yeah,
Yeah, they don't even mess with them.
Yep.
You know
It
what I
takes
mean?
away
I
all
can
the
keep them all
curiosity.
over the house.
Yeah.
They don't want it
Yeah.
no more. Dad, man, that's your gun. Leave it alone.
I was the same. I grew up in Alabama, but my family didn't hunt, weren't military. My dad's a pastor, but they just believed in them for self-defense. And so they were always around the house. We were also instructed very young with firearm safety. And then if my brothers especially wanted to shoot growing up, then my dad would take them and practice with them. I mostly didn't want to because I also have never loved the feeling of shooting a gun. Even now, I have a gun. I'm a registered concealed carry permit owner, but I don't love the feeling, to be honest. And you're right, it differs based on the gun. But I'm not a hobbyist. I think it still revolves around the element of self-defense for me. So it's something I think you need to take responsibility for.
Would anybody want to?
You know, specifically with Hannah, and if you've seen this video already, and hopefully you go watch the full video and support this kind of episode, let them know that you want more content around firearms and freedoms and continuing the great debates that they have. I wish Hannah, you know, obviously in her personal life, would become not like a pure hobbyist, but maybe she just didn't explain this, but would actually get out and maybe go to a training maybe once a year, and or at least get out with some people who are very, very proficient and train with each other, just to make sure that even in that self-defense, mindset, oh, it's just for self-defense. I'm not out here shooting for hobby. That's fine, but make sure that you are the best that you can possibly be, versus just going in and saying hey, I don't really enjoy shooting. Well, that's fine, but we got to get out there and actually shoot.
Kind of elaborate just on the feeling of firing a gun, whether it's positive or negative, just as more of an experience.
It depends on the gun, but a
depends
lot
on
of
the
them
person,
kick
too.
really heavily. Even
It does
I have
depend
a
on the
revolver
person.
that I got that's meant for women. It's about this big, and
What does it mean that something is meant for women? We actually got into a debate with somebody recently. He's like, there's no gun ever designed out there that's actually designed for women. And a lot of guys go into a gun store and they'll be like, oh, this one's for you. This is for ladies because it's pink and it's small and it's cute. And it's like, no, that doesn't actually help anyone with a small frame or small hands or, small fingers, which, is stereotypical of women, or typical of women rather. Very few guns like the Smith & Wesson EZ, maybe like the Smith & Wesson Equalizer, or the Walther PDP-F does that stand for female? Those are designed more around women or people with weaker wrist, weaker hand strength, because they're easier to rack. With the PDP-F, they literally scanned a bunch of women in Europe, their hands, to be able to design the grip, the trigger pull, all the different features around the gun, even the amount of strength that it takes in your hands to rack the slide. All of that was designed around women. And in the end, it made a gun that's even more enjoyable for some men. Obviously, if you're against those things, you're not going to enjoy it. But I think overall, it's that there are very few guns that are designed for women. So I just wanted to take a moment and just clarify that.
it's great to carry because it's small, it's easy, it's light, but shooting it sucks. It really hurts. Some of the larger
And that's a big issue where you have these smaller guns and they cannot contain the power of these larger caliber ammunitions. So, shooting 9 out of a really short barrel, boom, or whatever you're shooting it's too much. So bigger guns are usually better.
guns, like I've shot an AR-15, it's like butter. It doesn't hurt at all to shoot it. So it definitely depends
Usually.
on which instrument you're using.
I think the person too. I got post-traumatic stress, but they told me I got it different. I get a rush. So now when I shoot a gun, it's like, you know what I'm saying? I relieve all the stress, everything about me. I'm having a great time, you know what I'm saying?
look at that face. Look at this. Oh, let me see if I can rewind a little bit. Oh no, I lost my spot. Hold on.
Now when I
All right,
shoot
look
a
at
gun,
it.
it's like, you know what I'm saying? I relieve all the stress, everything about me. I'm having a great time, you know what I'm saying? So it's all on the person. And
She's like, ooh, I don't know if I want to be around. And I could just be reading into it, but that's interesting to see people's reactions, and obviously they caught that too.
a gun and everything, you know?
We're going to bring in our disagreeer.
Okay. This guy, I have a hard time with
Oh, you
this
never
one.
shot a gun?
So growing up, my family, we didn't really have a lot of guns around the house. And my cousins or my relatives didn't really have guns, or it wasn't like an outing.
It wasn't a thing. It wasn't
an
around,
outing,
yeah.
and I found a pellet gun. That's the only thing that my father had growing up, was a pellet gun that he hid in his closet away. And it was one day where me and my sister were playing around, and I found it, and I actually, pointed it towards my sister.
Didn't know
So
that.
it was a very traumatic experience for myself, right, and
I
for my
understand.
family, to the point where when that was brought up, it was more so like somebody said, education on how guns are not as helpful around communities of color. If there's not a right education.
Where did you grow up? Because
I grew up
I
in
live
New
around
York.
New Orleans, Louisiana.
I grew up.
So my question is, and before they get into it, if they do get into it, what does that even mean? What does helpful around communities of color, what does that mean? Why are you saying these things, Justice? Are you insinuating that we, communities of color can't handle that kind of responsibility, that we don't have the training or knowledge and education to handle them safely, that we don't deserve respecting, that we don't deserve the Second Amendment rights that are afforded to us within the Constitution? Do you not see us as equal? I mean, maybe I'm saying a lot and putting too much into your mouth, but I don't feel like that particular statement, and we can all say boneheaded things, that particular statement is pretty boneheaded, and I wouldn't advise you saying it again. In fact, don't say that in public.
New York, Brooklyn,
Is
New
it
York.
dangerous?
Yes. It was
So you don't think you need something to protect yourself?
Good question.
Well, not particularly in Brooklyn, New York, because there were already a mass surveillance of police who had.
Sounds like he's really trusting of the police, which is fine, I guess, but that's what it sounds like.
Guns,
Yeah,
right?
but police, you got to call police. It takes time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
We will have a prompt dedicated
all right,
to
yeah.
this.
Gotcha.
Perfect. It was
Okay,
never
great.
a curiosity for me because of that traumatic experience that I had with my sibling and not really having guns around. So I just never had that inkling in my life
it's
to even
understandable.
try to go to a range, or even when friends would suggest it, I would be like, oh, okay, good for you, you know, but I don't really have that
It's not your
interest.
thing. It's understandable.
Do you mind if I ask, did you actually accidentally shoot your sister as well? Or did you just point her
No,
over? Okay.
it was just,
Just a traumatic moment. Got you. No
watching
actual
film
violence.
and we're playing,
Yeah, I got you, blah,
right,
blah,
you
yeah.
know, bad guy or good guy.
You could have
and
made
then-
a big mistake.
And it was a pellet gun, and my mom was like,
Listen, pellet guns can hurt. People get really, really seriously injured. You can shoot your eye out, kid. You know, that kind of stuff. So you gotta be careful.
"Hey, if you point that again, and
Your mom knew that you wasn't supposed to point it.
Right.
If they would have taught you earlier,
Right.
you would have known that.
right, but I think they
I mean, key tenet of really any sort of firearm or device that's capable of shooting something out of the barrel is don't point at anything that you are not willing to destroy. You know, keep that finger off the trigger. You know your backstop, and obviously, treat it like it's loaded. And that's a big problem that a lot of people have is they unload a gun or they think a gun's unloaded and they like, oh, whatever. And then someone gets hurt. It's a big problem. So really respecting the firearm and respecting those tenets and those rules, that's huge when it comes to firearm safety. Let's go ahead and skip ahead a little bit.
among child-related deaths in America, gun violence was one of the main factors. That's alarming, right? Even before I knew that statistic, if I ever have kids, and I am planning on having kids, I would not allow my children to be around
Where
firearms.
did you get your statistics from? Because sometimes I look on the internet, they say one thing, then they say another thing,
Right.
and so you might be looking at something that might not even be right.
But
Right.
it is accurate.
Potentially.
I don't know, I just making sure.
Hold
That's
on, it
accurate.
is accurate, but it's accurate because death in children is exceedingly rare. There's very few things that kill them, period. And when you look
Yeah, Hannah Cox is an absolute unit when it comes to understanding statistics, and her political prowess is she's outclassing pretty much everybody here.
at the number of things that could kill them, yes, that outranks like drowning or being run over by your parents' car. But that statistic and many like it get thrown around to say like this is a huge problem that's happening all the time. That's not the reality. It's just that it's a low
I
sample
feel like
size.
even though if it's like a low probability, we should do what we can to stop it, right?
And should you focus your energy on like as a country, like nationwide, like creating laws around a thing to fix things that are kind of like lower on the totem pole. Like if it's low probability, why is the government getting involved? Or should we create, social efforts and social movements around encouraging people like, hey, if you got guns in your house and you got small children, you should definitely find ways to safely store those firearms. But that's on you, because if you fail that's on you. And if you do a great job on that, then that's also on you. You did a good job.
It is still the truth that is the
Exactly,
number one
like-
killer of children.
I mean, is there a
guns.
number of children that you would care about?
Is it
killing?
suicide killing?
Well, so I worked as a
it's
mental health.
gun-related.
Yeah, so I worked as a mental health therapist, and I specifically worked with a lot of kids too. But yeah, I mean, right now we have 50,000 suicides a year. Of that, 29,000 are from guns. Of those, 90% are successful when people do attempt. But when they do attempt with other different things, so say cutting your wrist, it's at 6.2%. If we look at things like drug overdoses, it's at like 10, 12%. It's because you have the ability to call the police, you have the ability for someone to find you. And so when it comes to things like having guns around children, you're putting it at a high rate of all of those different
The same
things.
is true having a pool at your house or having a car that you're driving. So I could ask you the same thing, like what number
So do
before
we-
we ban these other?
Yeah, I mean, do we have rules on driving?
We do have
How
rules.
many
We have a
rules do we
lot of
have?
rules on guns.
So sometimes we do this weird thing where it's a false equivalency, where we talk about cars and we talk about firearms and to lawful Americans, and they're not the same, because having a car and driving a car is not a constitutional right per se, but keeping and bearing arms is a constitutional right. So it's not one-to-one.
Forget everything, throw everything out the door. Is there a number that would draw you to say, I want heavy restrictions?
I always feel that's kind of like a disingenuous argument. Oftentimes we see people lying about the numbers or using the numbers to tell stories that are not there. And if you could kind of like understand the research even just a little bit. And I feel like Hannah Cox actually did a really great job, because she also did a reaction video, but she did a really good job of kind of breaking that down and showing some of the data that Jubilee even failed to show, and that's, I'm not going to attribute malice, but they were not perfect in presenting some of the data. And in that, did they skew data? Did some of the other data points look better or worse because the counterpoints were not presented?
With thousands of people over this, and they'll say like, no, I don't care. It's amendment right, which it's an amendment. We literally added it, and we changed the amendments, and we have many times. So to me, I throw that all out the window and just say, what is that number? What does that look like to you?
I think for me, the number would have to be that you could prove that there are more lives being lost to gun violence than saved.
Oh, that's easy. That's already happening right now.
It's no way. All right, so last year,
Yeah.
about 18,000 people were killed with a gun.
Yeah.
They estimate 162,000 people saved their own lives in interactions where they
Wait,
most
you said
certainly
how many people died with a gun last year?
Around 18,800.
But there's
and so-
29,000 just in suicides and guns last year. You're completely
I
wrong.
said gun homicides.
Okay, but-
18,000
yeah.
or so gun homicides. Just out.
Why?
Because suicides are a whole different matter and require different solutions. But we're going to talk about
No, 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 no.
homicides where
That-
you have no control in the situation.
Yeah, sorry.
Around 18,000 people were murdered last year with guns.
Yeah. Okay.
162,000 are the rough estimates for how many people saved their lives last year with a gun.
And
so when
define
you
save
could,
your lives.
So Hannah goes into kind of it's kind of hard to explain, where she's like the sparring back and forth with exactly what does it look like to save your life with a gun. And to me, that's just kind of a weird conversation. Obviously, with the statistics, and I need to look into that a little bit deeper myself. But here it says research at the University of California has determined that individuals with access to firearms are 3 times more likely to die of suicide and twice as likely to be killed in homicide compared to those who do not have access. But I wonder if they're going to present a fact check for Hannah.
They were in interactions where the statistics show they would have definitely or certainly lost their lives had they not had a gun to protect themselves. So they were in high-stakes situations where had they not had a gun to protect themselves, it is almost certain they would have been murdered.
I have a question.
certain?
Did they have to like shoot the gun in order to save themselves?
Yeah,
or
that's
just,
statistic.
Not always.
I've studied
Not
that
always.
statistic in depth, and what
We
you're
didn't
sa-
seem to know it.
No,
but
no.
no, they don't always have to have shot the gun. It is whether or not they had a gun. Sometimes they had to shoot it, sometimes they did not. But still, the statistics about how many people are saving their lives every year dwarf the number of
hold
gun
on.
violence homicides.
There's a problem with the statistic. I'll make it quick, which is there's no way to say for certain you would have died if you didn't have a gun. Let's say I go into Rob's.
Is there any way to know anything for certain, especially with a statistic like what she just gave, where it's like, hey, like, the guy had a gun pointed at my head, but maybe he might not have pulled the trigger. But here's my answer to that, right? Is if somebody has already proven, and this is where self-defense law, if you understand self-defense law in your specific state or, area, if somebody is already committing aggravated assault against you, like pointing a deadly weapon at you, demanding your goods, committing felonies against you, at that point, it doesn't really matter what they may or may not do next. You are obligated through, natural law, right, to protect and defend yourself the best way you can. And in certain areas, especially in the great state of Texas where I am, if somebody is threatening your life, you can respond. You are legally able to respond. And somebody might say you're morally obligated to respond, especially if you see a third party who's in duress. I'm not saying that you have to, because there's no legal obligation to respond, but somebody might say morally, you need to respond and use whatever force is necessary to defend your life, to stop the threat. And that's what firearms and self-defense incidents really come down to, is were you able to stop the threat against your life, period.
One with a gun, and then they had a gun and I left. That is not a statistic to say you would have died if you didn't have a gun.
Right.
And that's what that study actually shows.
That's not what it showed. It shows they were in interactions where somebody had a gun to their head. They were in a high-stakes situation, and had they not had a gun to
that
defend
person would
themselves,
have for sure pulled
they
the trigger.
most certainly would have.
How would you know that?
The likelihood is very high that they
how
would have.
would you know that?
And again, what?
Okay. All right. Let's fast forward just a little bit, see if there's other points in this conversation that are fascinating. All right. So this is going to be the last section we're going to look at before we conclude this video, but let's go.
Citizens should have guns to hold the government in check. If you agree, step forward.
Spicy topic.
Come on, let's be real. Nobody needs a nuke. You know what I mean? He keep on saying nukes. Man, come on, who gonna buy a nuke and put it in the house? Yeah, of course, we got a problem there. But guns, regular guns, I think everybody should have the right to get it. Why not? So let's be real. It's the Second Amendment. It's the second thing that they put in the amendment. And what is it for? The right to protect from a tyrannical government. It is the second thing that they put. Mm-hmm. The first is what? Freedom of speech, right?
It's the second thing they changed.
It's the second thing. So it got to be important.
It's not that we're all here waiting for the day that we can overthrow the government,
yeah.
right? And I'm not looking at how I can get a nuke.
Which would be crazy to admit.
So to overthrow the government.
Right.
I care more about my personal self-defense against common everyday predators, and I've experienced them. But the reality is, the ones with the guns have more control and more power, right? So if the government has all the weapons at their disposal to tell us what to do and we have nothing, then we are befallen to accommodate whatever it is that they request. We are the slaves. We are not free. We must do what they say because they hold all the power.
And I do think it's fascinating that some people are like, yeah, no, I mean, we're just worried about personal self-defense, and that's very important. But there is more to it. The Second Amendment was not designed for your personal self-defense. It was designed to be a stopgap, a safeguard against a tyrannical government, which people aren't comfortable with that conversation, usually.
For citizens to rise up. I think our government is horrendous. I think it's very big. I think it usurps people's liberties every day. It does many injustices. Probably
Preach.
the time for people to rise up was a long time ago. But
yeah, probably.
Whether or not it enables you to effectively overthrow the government, yes, maybe sometimes. You have the Battle of Athens in Tennessee, which was after World War II, where veterans came back to a very corrupt police force that was rigging elections and that was unjustly incarcerating people, and they organized and they...
Type Athens in the comment section if you are familiar with that story.
ran the sheriff out of town and they took over their government again. So yes, I do think that it is fundamental. I think our founders gave us that right in order to try to hold the government at bay. I think they had an understanding of power systems and how they always tend to grow and encroach on people's freedoms and liberties. And I think that were it not for the Second Amendment, were it not for the proliferation of guns and of people actively using their Second Amendment in this country, we probably would see a lot greater injustices. But I think if you look at the trajectory of countries that have disarmed people and where that's gone for them, it has increasingly led to a worse and worse quality of life.
I mean, we look at one of the more recent scenarios. I think Venezuela literally just stopped all sales, firearms, and restricting firearms. The biggest one is Myanmar, or I forget the other name for the country, but they basically banned guns and whatnot, and then there was a military coup, and now they have to. They're getting shipments of like 3D printed guns and machines to, so they can actually make their own guns and potentially fight back against the corrupt and evil military who has taken over the government. How easy do you think it would be for the U.S. military to take over the government, or to at least kick up enough dust for it to be a real issue?
Citizens standing up to the U.S. government with the military that it has look like?
It looks terrible, man. We would never want to see nothing like that. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
But I guess that's what I'm saying is if you say that it's to hold the government in check, what does that look like? Because our military is...
They're in check. They're not messing with us. I think of government as regular people. You know what I mean?
That's true.
It's still regular people that works the government. They're going to always put their self ahead. You know what I mean? If you have somebody that works in the government and their family's on the line and my family's on the line, what you think the government is going to do? Protect their family first. So why can't I be able to protect my family?
That's
So
a
when it
great
comes
point.
to what that looks like, it looks like
What does it
the
look like?
BLM rallies of a few years ago, pushing back against police brutality. It looks like the civil rights movement. It looks like nonviolent civil disobedience, often arming people in the community in that process because they will be attacked by police. They will be attacked by the government when there is a threat towards them. Those threaten their locuses of power. And you can see that in the overreaction to those events. People do have power. The government is afraid of us when we start actually communicating with one another, working across the aisle, building coalitions, petitioning, lobbying.
She's on fire. Type student of history. If you understand what she's talking about, where during civil rights, even during the BLM, right, however you feel about the BLM situation a few years back, doesn't matter. But to understand that people were able to push back against the government in government entities, and they were, I think that was, even though it kind of was bad for a lot of people, it was almost a good thing in a sense, where it reminded the federal government, state governments that, listen, like, you start messing around, and it doesn't matter if everybody in this group is unarmed or armed. Like, if there is 1,000 of them and one of you, it's not going to turn out great for you. Not really. So let's try to do things, in order, so that people don't start to lose their mind. What somebody said, I think it was MLK, that riots are the voice, the language of the unheard. And I hate to see riots. I hate to see people looting and burning and all the different stuff. But when you really look at it just from a macro perspective, to know that if it really comes down to it and the government decides to violate on scale or on mass civil rights, like if we go back to, not that long ago, back to Germany and what happened there, like if the people really decided to say no to a thing, they could. Like, we can say no. We don't have to do anything because this is America. We're American, baby. Like, we don't got to do nothing. Not a thing.
The problem is that the vast majority of Americans are off duty. They're not paying attention. They're asleep at the wheel. They're They're not doing the basic jobs they need to do to show up and hold their elected people accountable.
Sure.
But I've seen what happens when you do. It really doesn't take much to scare them because it's so random that it even occurs. So that's what it looks like. Nonviolent civil disobedience. It's Martin Luther King Jr.'s like 6 principles of change, and it works. And it works. And by the way, it works
You
across
said
the world.
nonviolent, right?
Yeah,
So
nonviolent
where do
civil
guns
disobedience.
have to do with
You
that?
have the gun if you have to defend yourself against the government. It
Yeah,
does
I
make
guess
them
when
less
I-
likely
has
to be
guns.
violent
I guess
against
all I'm
everyone.
saying is when I hear nonviolent protest, I don't think of firearms. Okay, so let's bring in.
Listen, I completely understand the concept of like, hey, nonviolent. But nonviolence only really works in my mind if there is actually a looming threat. Like, hey, we see the people here. It's not nasty yet, but maybe we should pay attention because it could potentially get nasty. And I'm not advocating for people to get nasty. I'm just saying the potential for things to get really rough. And I mean, if we're kind of nervous now and they're not armed, what happens when they go home and get armed? Or when, however that plays out, right?
The disagreeers.
I think our American government picks and chooses which citizens have the right to bear arms in a way. For example, like,
Sir, duh. But the question is, why are you on the anti-gun side when you understand that the government, who it sounds like maybe you're not a fan of the government, would try to keep that from you? Shouldn't you at that point decide, hey, maybe I'm not like the biggest fan of like the idea of being in a self-defense incident, which I don't know who is. That's kind of a creepy thing to be a fan of. But I should probably learn how to, defend myself with a firearm and have the biggest, best firearms available to me.
Hannah, or you were saying, in 2020, I was fortunate enough to be on the ground almost every day, organizing, empowering youth, especially Black and brown youth in Orange County. But what I seen was during these uprisings, we had white supremacist groups like Proud Boys, Patriot Front, and other white supremacist groups in Orange County, by the way, bearing arms, coming to these, peaceful, nonviolent rallies and bearing arms, brandishing firearms while police were there, and not get arrested, not get checked. But when we, as Black and brown folks in 2020, wanted to defend ourselves, maybe bring, some pepper spray or maybe have a taser in a backpack, I've seen many of my friends get arrested, 10 years, 20 years, get stopped and frisked.
I agree.
While white supremacists were
Interesting.
brandishing weapons in front of 10 to 15-year-old Black and brown people. So that's why I disagreed, because
I would love to see the actual cases. I don't doubt what he's saying. I don't know that California has any sort of open carry laws, especially since the Mumford Act. But there's a few ways to spin this or cut this, and we'll see.
I think our American government, they tend to pick and choose which citizens in America get to bear arms.
And I think that the Black Panthers is a perfect example of that. That's exactly what was going on with the Black Panthers. They armed themselves
So they know
to be able
history.
to stand up to a government that was putting a tax on them, basically, right? We all know what happens, right? It's in practice, like, yes, the Second Amendment, that's what it's supposed to do, but it depends who has the weapons.
I actually kind of disagree with the prompt for a different reason. I feel like, for me personally, I don't like guns, right? And I'm not going to encourage anyone that I know to get a gun. And I
don't like guns.
just don't like anything really violent. And you could say that
Okay.
I'm living in a fairy tale world because I don't
Yes.
use violence and stuff like that. And I definitely
Yes.
am, but I mean, the bottom line is
she
I don't like
acknowledges.
violence, and I'm not going
Okay.
to advocate for anyone to perform acts of
But you
violence.
see, I respect those type.
The question is the act, because we're living in a weird time where the word violence has been redefined, right? Silence is violence. Your words are violence. Your passivism is violence. I say passivism. That's not the right. And I'm not trying to demean people who maybe have said that or felt that way, that maybe somebody was doing ill towards them by utilizing cruel language or by being passive and allowing somebody else to be cruel and ignoring the cruelty. Like that, there's something to that. But for her, it's almost like, hey, you even owning a gun, and I wonder if she's going to say as much, you even owning a gun with the possibility of having to use it to defend yourself against the worst of violence, against brutal racist, whatever you want to, say. I wonder if she understands like, hey, like this is within your right as a woman to make sure that you are defended, that you are taken care of, and to fight back against the evils that, some people would inflict upon you, men and women, right? I don't think she gets that.
That's fine. If you don't like violence and you want to be great, that's cool. But would you ever want to protect yourself?
Well, I'm fortunate enough to live in an area that's pretty safe. I don't.
Oh boy, don't tell me how fortunate you are. Oh man, she said I'm taken care of. I'm a princess. I'm good. Like I don't need a gun. They're gonna take care of me.
Don't feel scared or the need to protect myself when I am walking alone at night, which is great. I'm really fortunate for that.
I'm so happy
See, it's all
for you.
about where you live.
It's where you live.
Where you live does.
Let's go back to the prompt. We're talking about citizens having guns to protect themselves from the
Thanks,
government.
moderator.
There's so many arguments to want a gun, right? I think the self-protection is probably one of the strongest.
I really want to see where he's going to go, because as a guy from the Middle East who has seen interesting things happen, the Middle East has kind of come against a lot of different things, from like governments that aren't exactly stable to even in 2001, 2, 3 and onwards, where we had the United States invading Iraq and invading Afghanistan, and potentially invading other areas around the globe. And then we have people fighting back against the United States, against us, for whatever reason, whether it's because they're the bad guys or because, they lost somebody and now they become radicalized and they become terrorists. And like, there's some deep conversations that could happen here. And I'm really wondering where he's going to go with this.
Ones. I think second is like, hey, I live in Georgia on a farm. Like the odds of me going out and doing this when I have a farm and this and that, like I want to hunt. I think those are reasonable. So I come from a different view of like, guns should just be regulated. They should be restricted in a way. And if there's a reason you need it, I think it's perfectly right, especially in this day and age. But the idea of like, I need this because I'm going to fight the government. Yes, 200.
So he's not a fan of fighting the government, which who is, but he is willing to, I guess, admit that some people would potentially need a gun. And if you have any sort of reason, then you should be able to get one. Now, what happens when you have MLK, who actually applied for a gun permit, but was denied because he was in a state that is, right to issue, a right to issue state? And in that sense, where if you have some sort of racist or prejudice or even just kind of picking on you or bullying you, person in power, over the sheriff's office or whoever, county commissioner or whoever, cleric, you're out of luck. And now your rights are being withheld from you because of a person or persons.
Years ago when this was written, or longer, the government did look drastically different. The weapons that they had looked drastically different. It was a little bit more of a playing field. I just think that now, I'm sure everyone on the pro-gun side agrees that the government's way too big, but none of you have picked up arms and went to the Capitol building and tried to actually shoot or do anything. And going to the Capitol building on January 6th didn't do anything, even with many of them. So in that sense, like, takes for people to actually pick up arms. I studied this for a long time.
But you're taking it the wrong way, bro. Like, let's say they try to come get guns right now. You think all the people who guns
it's just
gonna fight
fear-mongering.
back? That's when it's going to fight against the government.
That's what they said in Australia, and that's
Australia. That's not America.
I think it's a rarity that you could see people rise up and effectively do this because of how big the government is, because of its techniques and tools. It would require actively training and organizing for some time.
The government techniques are really interesting, especially considering they could literally just send you a letter and say like, hey, we know where you live. Send your gun in, or we're going to do whatever we want. Let's say they decide, we're just going to levy or just tax you extra or fine you or put a lien on this, or they could literally damage you without actually showing up. And at that point, are you willing to organize and say, like, enough is enough? Not saying we're going to hurt anybody or be violent, because that's not okay. Like, I'm not interested in doing those things. Unless, of course, we're in situations where it's justified. I'm perfectly fine with using justifiable force. But this is such a deep conversation. Let's keep going.
But if not that, then what is the solution for when things really hit the fan? What is the answer for people?
I think it's just
in
fear
those
mongering. It's a
situations?
slippery slope of like, we're going to be North Korea
but
if we
you
don't have
can't.
guns.
I think you have a little bit too much faith in man, in humankind. Like, you really believe that, oh, we're the capital in the Hunger Games and we'll always take care of each other. And that's not generally the case.
You can end up there. So what do those people do?
So I think there's a drastic difference between America and North Korea. If you're creating, again, a whole different scenario, there is context. It would be a completely different answer.
But I'm just asking.
It is a different
not,
society.
if
right?
not Second Amendment.
Gandhi, for example, he picked up like AR-15s and guns and he shot, right? That's how he freed it.
Why are you referencing Gandhi?
How did he free India?
Not through violence, through
was
non-violence.
How
So what
did
you
he?
said, it's
Community,
it's basically a lot
And
of
who
it is
did
just
he overthrow?
organizing.
Organizing, yeah.
But what I'm saying is,
But
in
who
these,
did he overthrow?
I'm saying getting freedom.
Answer the question.
No, I'm just saying you're getting.
We
No, I'm
all
saying-
need to know. Who did he overthrow?
No, I'm saying the government. I'm saying people who
But
are in
what
power over
government
them.
system did he overthrow?
Even if it's England,
All
even
Fact check. Mahatma Gandhi, known as the father of India, was a lawyer, politician, and politician who led a successful nationalist movement against British rule. He implemented a doctrine of nonviolent protest called Statnagira. Gosh, stop trying.
it's
But he
anyone.
didn't.
But
Like,
I'm-
he had a great movement. He didn't overthrow a government.
But did he change anything?
He definitely changes people's opinion.
But we're
That's not
talking
what I'm
about
asking.
overthrowing
I'm
a
asking,
government.
how do you overthrow a
But-
tyrannical
Okay, but
government
you're saying
without a
over-
Second Amendment?
But there's this like
Check
distinction between
and
overthrow and change. In
mate.
Egypt, you could call it overthrow, you can call it change. They got the
They had a
president
military
out.
coup.
In
Well,
Egypt?
Yes.
Or in
I
Tunisia?
mean,
A military
I
with
wanna
guns, with
piggyback
guns.
on
That's
that. I want
not-
to piggyback on
Here we go.
I was
Okay.
actually there.
I'm gonna
You got
Hannah,
to
I'm
have
gonna let you
guns.
ask. I just want to say, in South
Gosh.
Africa, they overthrew the government through nonviolent means. Nelson Mandela preached nonviolence, and he actually was in prison for 20 years and still on the terrorist watch list because even when Obama was in office, he was on a terrorist watch list for overthrowing the government of South Africa for apartheid.
There were no guns involved in that.
And there was no type of faction groups involved. I mean, there were some faction groups, but Nelson Mandela didn't promote that.
Okay, but plenty of people had guns.
They had
In order
weapons.
to do that, they had weapons. I don't know of any example throughout history where you have seen a tyrannical government actively overthrown without the use of guns by some parties, and nonviolent
Okay,
people
Sarah,
and advocates
I mean,
are
Haiti,
important.
we see Haiti.
I
right
hear,
now.
I hear
You're
your
right,
point.
you're right.
The NRA is a respectable organization. Will the agreeers please step forward?
Does anybody?
Oh,
Sorry, buddy. Sorry, guys.
yes.
I didn't see this on my bingo card.
Shots
All right,
fired.
whoever disagrees, come on.
I don't know. I guess we could all.
Okay, we're gonna call it here just because I think we've gone on long enough. Yeah, this has been really interesting. I hope that you have found this educational. You really, I think to get the full, I guess, taste, you got to go back and watch this full video. And of course, leave a friendly comment. Don't bully Justice just because he said a few things that I don't agree with. Most of the anti-gunners were, I think, trying to make good points, but ultimately failed in many occasions. So be kind, be respectful. Let them know that you respectfully disagree, and go out there, train, get a gun, do your thing, train with people, get stronger together, go hit the gym, get stronger together, go be with your family, love harder together, do the thing. And I'll see you next time.